So the next couple of videos are going to be about my draping process for this costume that I've been wanting to make. I took draping classes in like pattern making and draping about like over 10 years ago. So draping and pattern making isn't something I do on a weekly basis, but it's something I want to get better at. And I was recently given a mannequin from the 1940s to practice on. So this is going to be a little bit of a relearning process for me. I mean, I never really mastered the skill of pattern making. So, but figured I would document the journey. And yeah, so I'm excited. This is hopefully something that I will eventually be more confident in. So, you know, there's no time like the present to start practicing and mastering the skill. So that's what I'm going to be doing. It's not going to be, I mean, I'll be showing you how I do it, but this is not really a tutorial on how to do it because I'm kind of learning as I go. So, but yeah, if you just enjoy watching someone struggle through a process of learning something, feel free to stick around. And it will be kind of like a vloggy type of a couple of videos. I think it'll be multiple videos. Yeah, so it will, it'll be like working on the project and then obviously taking breaks to go to work and go to rehearsal and whatever else I'm doing that week. So, yeah.
My first order of business was to find a dress design I wanted to base my pattern off of. So obviously I went to Pinterest. I knew I wanted something 18th century style with princess seams and lots of frills down the front. I finally settled on something like this. So here I am showing you the fabric that I have chosen. There isn't a lot of this, so I was trying to determine if there would even be enough for the project. But I figured if I used this fabric for the bodice, the sleeves, and the overlay, that should be enough, and then I would use something else for the underskirt. And I had this matching ruffle piece that I knew I wanted to use on it somewhere as well. I did have to dig out my mannequin from the other side of the basement because she was stuck in storage. And here she is in all her dusty glory. She is from the 1940s and definitely shows her age, but she is remarkably close to my size. And I didn't even pick this out myself. I was given this mannequin. So I'm just really thankful to have it. Let me tell you, this thing is hard to move because you go to lift it up and the cage moves, but then you have to use more muscle to actually lift the mannequin. So I just kind of scooped her up and muscled my way out the door. There definitely wasn't room for both of us to fit through the door, so I just set her down, readjusted, and we continued our journey. Okay, so here I am explaining the beginning of the draping process, which for me involves taping out the design I am attempting to make on the mannequin. This tape was pretty old. This is at least 10, 12 years old, so it did not work. It did not stick. It was super thin. So I went upstairs, got some masking tape, and just did it with masking tape, even though professional drapers don't use masking tape, but I'm not a professional at this point, so it's fine. And it stuck much better, and I was able to get the design on there. So this is what I came up with. I wanted to make a bodice with lots of seams, hoping that it would have a waist snatching appearance, but in hindsight, this was not a good idea. I also made a more simple side as well, in case the original intricate design didn't work out. And then I got started on draping the fabric. So normally people drape with muslin cloth, which is a very natural cotton material, and it's easy to work with. I just had an old cotton sheet lying around, so I cut strips and pinned them onto the mannequin and then outlined the tape with a permanent marker. When I was done draping, I cut out the pieces, laid them next to each other to make sure they would all match up, which they did for the most part. I was a little nervous about the shoulder because it had a separate piece, but I figured I would deal with that later. And I labeled them and put them on tissue paper to add seam allowance to. So with the help of my gauge and a ruler, I added a 1/2 inch for seam allowance. So that would give me enough room to adjust and play around with the exact measurements. I like to add more seam allowance than may be necessary, just so that if there are a lot of adjustments and tailoring, it's easier and then I don't have to cut new pieces. I can just work within the seam. With my gauge, I just marked every couple inches and then connected all the marks, and it ended up working pretty good, and I feel like I got a fairly normal pattern piece. So after I'd cut out all my pieces, I pinned them to more of an old sheet, and I was pretty excited to start sewing the mock-up. Now, once the pieces were all lined up, it was a little concerning. I can't really explain what was going on with the waist, but I figured I would just attempt to trust the process and see what would happen. Rigatoni joined me in the windowsill, and I got to sewing. Having completed my first mock-up, I put it on the mannequin and was quickly disappointed because I realized that there was no way this was going to work. The back didn't line up and the waist was still a problem, but I had to go to work, so I just threw it on the ground and decided to deal with it later.
So the draping was a total failure, and we're gonna have to start the whole project over again. Okay, this is my new rendition. I made the waist longer. I'm having it all come to a point. These pieces, or at least this piece for sure, is going to be cut on the bias. As you can see, the waist is long all the way in the back because this is the waistline, so we're dropping it a little bit. And there's less shoulder pieces. It's a simpler design.
And then I began to start the project over again. I couldn't even be that upset because it's been a long time since I've done this, and it was a learning process. It is a learning process, and anything worth getting good at takes time and practice. So I kind of just saw it as another opportunity to do a better job. In the afternoon, I went to my day job, which is working at Aladdin on Broadway in the wardrobe department. And on this particular day, I was doing a costume call. So I was in charge of the men's ensemble stage right costumes, and I was checking for any rips or tears that had happened from the show before. And I repaired the rips, and I sewed on new buttons and steamed out the costumes to get them ready for tonight's show. So I thought I was going to be a lot more upset than I am about having to redo this whole project, redrape, redo everything. But I'm not. I'm actually inspired and excited. I feel good about the way that this pattern is turning out. In the past, I would have just given up and been like, well, you know, pattern making is hard. Why reinvent the wheel? Let's just use something we know works. And I kind of thought about it this time, and I was like, maybe I should just save the fabric for a pattern that is easier, that I already have. And then I was like, no, I'm not gonna give up that easily. I do that too much when it comes to draping. So holding myself accountable, I'm going to push through. And I also feel like this is gonna be a good pattern this time. And talk to me after if it turns out really bad. Maybe I will give up. No, I'm on a quest to make a good pattern, and if this isn't perfect, which I think it's gonna be a lot better than the first one, but if it isn't, I'll just revise what I have. Like, I think I'll be able to pinpoint the problem areas. So here we are, same process, rinse and repeat. I did upgrade my paper from tissue paper to shipping paper.
All right, I'm actually trimming these down another 1/2 inch because I wanted to cover my bases. I made 1 inch seam allowance, but that is too big, so. Okay, here we are. So I made the mock-up on this brown fabric. It kind of matches the mannequin here, so it might be kind of hard to see. But this is a whole lot better than the first one. It fits a lot better. It's actually, I feel like it's almost a little big, and that is fine because we can we can take it up. But I'm really glad that I dropped the waist. It sits much better on the waist and it comes to a point. I think these lines could be a little straighter here. So that's something to note for the future pattern here. I did give a lot of extra room in the back because I think this mannequin is smaller than me, so I need, you know, extra like fabric in the back to close it. But this is what it looks like fitted. But the shoulders want to be flattened. The shoulders want to sit out farther. So I'm just gonna pin up the back like this. Neckline is too high. So I'm thinking about lowering the neckline and bringing this seam in, like making, you know, sewing this seam up a little bit. And I'm gonna see if that fixes the issue. But this is so much better. And it's just a couple panels. It really fits the body a lot better. That feels better. So I'm gonna try to explain best I can, but basically this whole thing is too big. So I'm thinking if I take it in, you know, like a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, whatever, that would just tighten the whole thing. But if I do that down here, like there's not much left to take up. So I'm going to take this bodice apart. I'm going to trace it out on paper, making it a little smaller, but making the end here bigger.
I then traced out pattern pieces for the 3rd time and adjusted the seam allowance. I didn't end up making the end of the front bodice pieces any bigger. I just kind of straightened out the lines because the fabric was stretchy and they were crooked, and it wasn't helping with how it was rippling at the point of the bodice. So I fixed that. Rigatoni was a big help passing me the ruler.
This is the final mock-up, well, what I'm hoping to be the final mock-up. And it's still sitting kind of far off the shoulders. I feel like Civil War had this neckline more than Revolutionary War. So, you know, there's that. And the back, I can't see the back obviously, but I feel like it needs a little more room, especially at the bottom. So I'm gonna have to add more to the back. I think I'm ready to like start cutting out the fabric. Maybe I'm a little ambitious, but I'm just gonna go for it. I still need to learn how to draft sleeves and then obviously the overskirt. So I'm thinking, but I think I'm going to make it piece by piece. So instead of drafting out the whole costume, which is probably what you're supposed to do, I'm just gonna start little by little. We're gonna start with the bodice and we're gonna cut into the real fabric. Probably not advised in professional pattern making, but you know what? This is, we're starting out, we're learning.